Good evening all. Please be seated. Welcome to this meeting of Full Council. I'm Councillor Imtiaz Sheikh, the Mayor of Swindon. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube. I'd like to thank any members of the public who have joined us this evening or who may be watching at home. I'm sure members will join me in making sure that we provide the best window on local democracy. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please follow the officers and leave via the nearest exit in reception and assemble in the car park between Wat Tyler West and Clarence House. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. The Wi-Fi password for those who wish to use it is sounds, layers, slices. All lowercase and all one word. Please can you remember to switch on your microphone when invited to speak and to switch it off when finished. Can I also ask you to make sure you have switched any devices you have to silent. Before we begin the meeting, I wanted to share a brief update on my 6 months as mayor. It's been an incredible journey filled with 178 engagements, each one a reminder of the vibrant and caring community we have in Swindon. A particular highlight was leading the Remembrance services this month. It was truly moving to see Swindon unite in remembrance for those who have fallen. Last week's Christmas light switch on was fantastic. I encourage everyone to enjoy the festive lights in town and Old Town this weekend. I'm also excited about our growing Community Connections Forum, which is bringing together people from all walks of life. This initiative is fostering a sense of belonging and unity, and I'm grateful for the support of everyone involved. As we move forward, raising awareness and funds for my chosen charities remains a top priority. Our current focus is the Great Swindon Challenge in January. I encourage you to form a team to cover 55 miles and help us raise £550 for a great cause. £550, £550. Your participation will make a real difference. Please contact my office for further details. Tomorrow, we'll be honoring the dedicated officers of Swindon Borough Council at the annual award ceremony. Together, we can make Swindon an even better place to live. Thank you all for your continued support. I would also like to wish Councillor Cook his 70th happy birthday. And I'm impressed that you're here today. We will begin with the agenda item 1, which are the apologies for absence. The Chief Executive will report any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Stanka Adam Korver, Councillor Junab Ali, Councillor Raja Ali, Councillor John Ballman, Councillor Ray Ballman, Councillor Repi Begum, Councillor Lawrence Elliott, Councillor Anna Fernandez, Councillor Princia Fernandez, Councillor Suresha Gatapur, Councillor Annabel Pagado, Councillor Adorable Sheikh and Councillor Kevin Small.
Are there any apologies from the floor? Thank you. I will ask the clerk to note those apologies. Moving on to agenda item 2, which is return of councillors elected. I would draw members' attention to the report set out on pages 7 to 8 of the agenda papers regarding the return of a councillor elected. Can I have a mover and seconder to note and welcome the return of Councillor Sudha Sri Nukana, elected to serve on Swindon Borough Council on Thursday, 17th October 2024 in the Rodbourne Cheney ward. Please may I have a mover and seconder, please.
Thank you. Can I just firstly say happy birthday to Councillor Cook. I find it unbelievable for two reasons. One, that you've chosen to spend your birthday here in a council meeting, and two, that you're 70 years old. I would say I wish I'd looked that good when I'm 70. I don't look that good now. But I'm really here to welcome the return of Councillor Nukana. It's sort of a re-election. It's nice to have you back in the chamber. Congratulations on your win. I know that the feedback has always been that you're an exceptionally good ward councillor, so I'm sure that you will continue in that spirit, and welcome back to the council.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second and again thank my colleague for being a fantastic ward councillor, recognised on the doorstep. She's a really great part of our group and so pleased to have her back. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I put that the return of Councillor Sudha Sri Nukana, elected to serve on Swindon Borough Council on Thursday, 17th October 2024 in the Rodbourne Cheney ward be noted. All those in favour, please show hands. I don't see any against and abstentions, so vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 3, which is communication. Apologies. Councillor, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank the residents of the Rodbourne Cheney for having the trust in me and bringing back to the community, especially to the Conservatives team members as well for their great teamwork to bringing me back here, and all the people who are welcoming me with a heart. Thank you so much.
Moving on to agenda item 3, which is communications.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some communications to report. So on the 1st of October, I received communications from the Deputy Prime Minister regarding the government's ambition to house all veterans in housing need and to develop better access to social housing for care leavers and victims of domestic abuse. On the 3rd of October, I received a letter from the Minister of State for Housing and Planning, Matthew Pennycook MP, regarding compulsory purchase scheme reforms and the publication of updated guidance. On the 10th of October, I received a letter from the Minister of State for Local Government and English Devolution, Jim McMahon MP, regarding the launch of the Cyber Assessment Framework for Local Government. On the 26th of October, I received correspondence from Lord Khan of Burnley relating to changes to be made to payments relating to the Ukraine Permission Extension Scheme. Yesterday, I received a letter from Lisa Nandy, Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, about the Civil Society Covenant. And today, right up to date, I received a letter from the Minister of State for Local Government and English Devolution, Jim McMahon MP, regarding the policy statement on local government finance, which I haven't yet read. I will ensure all correspondence is attached to the minutes.
Moving on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. Can I have a mover and seconder to agree that the minutes of the meetings held on 19th September 2024, which are on pages 9 to 16 of the agenda papers, be approved as a correct record?
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I put that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on 19th of September 2024 be approved as a true record. All those in favour, please show. I declare the vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is declaration of interest. Members should declare now any known interest in any matter to be considered, and also during the meeting if it becomes apparent that they have an interest in the matters being discussed. If you have a declaration, please remember to state whether the declaration of interest is personal or prejudicial. If the declaration is prejudicial, could the members please state the reason? Are there any declaration? Moving on to agenda item 6, which is public questions. May I remind members of the public that questions should be clear, relevant, and concise. Public question time is not an opportunity to make speeches or statements. Questions must not deal with confidential, personal, or other information which the law permits the Council to deal with in private. Nor should any question relate to a specific planning application. The maximum amount of the time allocated for public question is 15 minutes. If we run out of time, any questions that are yet to be asked will receive written responses following the meeting. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website in due course. Advance notice has been received from Bob Wright, Christopher Evans, Angie Sear, beg your pardon if I don't pronounce the surname right, Cyril, is that right? Sir. Anne Slatter, Sue DeVittori, Emma Bowman. Okay. I will take each of these in turn and invite the speakers to come to the microphone to ask their questions. Please speak straight into the microphone from about 6 inches, 15 centimeters away. After you have finished speaking, I will ask the relevant cabinet member to respond. You will then have the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, and this should be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. I will then invite the relevant cabinet member to respond to your supplementary question. To begin, please, can I invite Mr. Bob Wright to the microphone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Swindon Council has assisted hockey, football, cycling, athletics, theatres, heritage and golf through buildings, land, facilities and ownership. Will it do the same for Swindon's 5 times national champions, Swindon Speedway, who have the second best attendance record in this town?
Robbins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. I always worry I'm going to call you Councilor Wright again. Thank you for the question. I think that there has been a lot of support from the Council to various bodies in the past. It isn't something that we've been able to do in the last few years because of the financial situation in which we find ourselves. The only one of those organisations that we've really been able to help as a new administration is the Swindon Wildcats when they had the flooding last year, and we were able to bring forward some funding that was already allocated to the Link Centre and pay it early to make sure that they could get the rink back in operation as quickly as possible to allow them to continue with their season. But that wasn't new money that the council found. That was just us simply bringing forward a budget obligation we already had to the Link Centre. I would love to be able to help Swindon Speedway. We've had meetings with representatives from Swindon Speedway, had meetings with the previous managers of the team, and had meetings with Gaming International. It isn't something that we're able to do at the moment because there isn't an opportunity where we can support the Speedway sector whilst allowing us to do it in the budget sort of window that we're operating within. It is not because we have any unhappiness or desire to see the end of Speedway would love to see Speedway return. It's incredibly disappointing for the team that they won the championship back in 2019 and then haven't been able to compete. It's a really sad thing for the town. And we will continue to offer to work with representatives from the Speedway groups to try and find a way forward where we can support them.
Could I ask you to reconsider your response, as I've personally been with you at an opening of a new cycling track? You've got a proposal for a new theatre, and you have a large piece of land at Highworth that you have to dispose of. I think you have the flexibility. I'm not sure if you recognise that, Leader.
So Morden Sports Hub, really important development, but it certainly wasn't the council that led the way in that. That was Central North Swindon Parish, aided by various sporting bodies. We would love to be able to help. The theatre is something that we're still working through. Obviously, that constitutes part of our Heart of Swindon approach. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to try and put a Speedway centre in the centre of town. But as I said, I made it really clear, if there is a way that we can actively support people bringing Speedway back to the town, we will do it. But it isn't something that we will be able to take the lead on financially at the moment because of the challenging state of our finances.
Christopher Evans.
Thank you. My name is Christopher Evans. I'm the owner of 56 Victoria Road. I'm here to ask a question regarding the property next to mine, namely 57 Victoria Road. Before I do that, I'd like to set the scene. Some of you may be aware that this property has featured not only in the Swindon Advertiser, but also the Mail Online and the Sun Online. It has gained national coverage for a rather embarrassing reason. That reason is that this once rather grand and prestigious house has become the most disgusting, dilapidated eyesore on one of the most prominent roads in the town. I don't know whether the camera can see that, but it really is awful to look at. It appears that nothing can be done about it. It's been like this for nearly 30 years. It's covered in graffiti and posters. It's regularly broken into by squatters and used as a den for drug taking and antisocial behaviour. It's adjacent to a bus stop, and I see people on the bus look at it and shake their heads in disbelief when the bus stops outside. Well, over a year ago, I finally had enough and contacted the council to see what could be done. I was told it could be dealt with under the Town and Country Planning Act. What is known as a Section 215 notice could be served on the owner, requiring him, within a set timescale, to, as a minimum, rectify the damage to the front aspect and return it to a decent cosmetic standard. This was to be administered by the Housing Needs Department and the Empty Homes Department. The officer in question, I will spare names to save embarrassment, told me nearly a year ago that the notice had been served. If the owner did not comply and begin the work within the following month, the council would commence this work and pursue the owner for the cost. Month after month has gone by, and here we are. To date, no work has ever been started. I was told by the officer in every subsequent month the owner had promised it would begin. It never has. Finally, in exasperation, I actually managed to make email contact with the chief exec, Sam Mowbray. Incidentally, it's impossible to find Sam's email or contact details anywhere on the SBC website, no matter how hard you search. But of course they can readily be found on her LinkedIn profile. Sam told me how frustrating this situation must be for me, and said she had arranged for the Chief Planning Officer
Sorry, Mr.
to
Evans,
contact me.
can you come to the question, please?
He never did. Well, I was born in Swindon, sir, and I grew up here. I was educated here, and my business is here. I care very much about this town and its reputation. I care about how it's perceived. This disgusting property next to mine would indicate that the owner cares nothing about such matters. But does this council care enough to do something? After a few more weeks of silence, Samantha stated that the council does not have the funds to carry out the work.
Mr. Evans,
I'll be
please,
finished in a second, sir.
we have many questions lined up.
It was rather an embarrassing admission, though, wasn't it? And it's reported in the national media that a local government council does not seem to have the will or the funds to enact its own legally served policy. So my question is this: how can the town centre be revitalised, as Mr. Robbins has said, when this council allows the owner of 57 Victoria Road, and no doubt other rogue owners, to break legally binding enforcement notices with such ease and such apparent impunity? Thank you.
Respected cabinet member, would you like to respond?
I'm going to respond to you, Mr. Evans, and assure you that next week there is a meeting of officers to decide and discuss upon this actual problem. The Chief Executive is fully aware of this and has called this for officers to meet, and you will receive a letter within the next week as to the way forward with this property. Thank you.
I certainly hope so, because at the moment it's extremely frustrating, and for someone who was born in the town, it's not good enough.
Can I just say that I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing, and if you haven't received anything by the end of next week, please contact me.
Angie Searle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a resident of Rawton. I live at 55 Perry's Lane. My boundary is the stream that has been overflowing every winter now for about the last 4 years. Maybe not in 2023. The latest flood was last Sunday. What are you doing about this culvert? This culvert has had hundreds of thousands of pounds spent on it in the last 3 or 4 years. But there is no resolution. Our homes and gardens are being flooded. We're wallowing in mud and silt and rubbish. Who is going to do something? I know there's no money. I'm aware of that. But when I hear that 80% of the council budget is spent on children and adults, and they do need help, I agree. But the residents of Rawton need your help. Please do something about this culvert for us. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and what I'll do is I'll give you a full written response to that, but I look forward to meeting you and your neighbours very shortly to go through that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anne Slater.
My name's Mrs. Emma Bullman. I'm also here to represent the residents of Perry's Lane, which is obviously the same issue. It's the culvert and it's the flooding. What I would like to know is, in the instance when I have water pouring through my air bricks underneath my house, and no one will answer the phone, what am I meant to do? Because it took Facebook to bring a local council lad out in his van to stop the traffic, which causes big waves and the water and the silt and everything. It goes into my house, it causes my electricity to go off, and I feel a little bit like the laughing stock of Rawton. Her house is flooded again. So in addition to what are you going to do with the culvert, what are you going to do for me in an emergency and the residents of Perry's Lane? We have had a letter from a Zoe Moore in April stating that there was an investigation going on into the culvert and that they would let us know with advice from the Environment Agency what was going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for the question again. I'll give you a full written answer and look forward to meeting you to discuss this.
With a very similar issue, questions. So Anne Slater, would you like to? No? And Sue? All right, thank you. Are there any other questions, public questions? Please, when you come to the microphone, could you please state your name?
Good evening, Mr Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. Josie Lewis, long-standing resident of Swindon. First question, I don't expect an answer tonight. Wilts County Council are 120 sites short on gypsy sites. I just wondered whether this encompassed Swindon or whether Swindon has its own deficit. So I'm happy to wait for an answer then on that in due course in writing. It's not essential, it's not necessarily that important. My second question is, I'm still waiting for the Gorse Hill land, the Tiverton Road and the Cricklade Road field to be maintained. I now hear that the Forest Group want to make an opening in the west end of Tiverton Road. Their lease says that no alterations whatsoever can be made to the field, yet they intend to make it without planning permission. And I'm just giving excuse. I know James Robbins has replied to me. I've asked for a site meeting to get this land mowed. But it's not happening. So can I arrange a date for a site meeting, please, with one of the councillors?
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you for your question. I think you've got your response from Councillor Small rather than from me. But I'm more than happy to work with Councillor Small and work on getting a site visit for you to see if we can work out and get to the bottom of this.
Can we do that, please? Because the response I got from Councillor Small, who has been helpful, he said that Herriot Burner have wilded the two fields. Well, one's a recreation ground, so it's got to be mowed short, like St Mark's Rec, Edinburgh Street, Southbrook Rec, all the others Rec, Mannington, Westcott. It's supposed to be mown short. It's knee-high. The trees went in without planning permission, and breach of planning is actually a criminal offence, so you can't just go around granting retrospective planning. The Tiverton Road field is supposed to be mowed twice a year, and it's barely been mowed. If it's ever been mowed at all, it's been mowed by residents. So can we arrange maybe a site meeting, not next week, maybe the week after or something?
I will speak to Councillor Small when he is fit and well, and we will come up with a date that we can both do.
Yeah, if he's not well, I fully understand it, but yeah, maybe a couple of weeks' time or something. Yeah, thank you very much.
Moving on to agenda item 7, which is numbers to serve on committees, allocations of seats to political groups and appointments to committees. I would draw members' attention to the report set out on pages 17 to 20 of the agenda papers pack. Can I have a mover and seconder to propose recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 as set out on page 17 of the agenda papers pack?
Happy to move, Mr Mayor.
I'll second, please, Mr Mayor.
Are there any members who wish to speak to report, or are there any additional changes to appointments that the political groups wish to table in accordance with recommendations 2.4? As there are no further appointments being put forward by the political groups, I put to the vote that recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 be agreed. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? I declare the vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is the council petition scheme. I would draw members' attention to the report set out on pages 21 to 26 of the agenda papers pack. I would invite Andy Freegard, the lead petitioner, to present and support the Swindon Needs Speedway petition. Mr. Freegard, please go to the microphone. Please speak straight into the microphone from about 6 inches, 15 centimeters away. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Mr. Mayor, if it helps, the opportunity for members to declare any interest has been given and no interest have been declared. And just to add, therefore, as no interests have been declared, members may vote and take part in the debate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll make a start. At a recent council meeting with Councillor Robbins and Corporate Director James Coulstock, Mr Coulstock stated that the Abbey Stadium planning approach would have been very different had he been in office at the time. Tonight, we need that different approach, an approach that's been adopted by other councils to support Speedway. Private companies have bought stadiums across the country to run them down and build housing. Swindon has become a victim of this deception. This has resulted in the loss of our Speedway. We have provided each councillor with a physical copy of this document. This details the deception that's been carried out by the Abbey Stadium owners, Gaming International, and the same approach that they've applied to other stadiums across the country. They have previously allowed Bristol, Milton Keynes and Reading stadiums to become dilapidated and then have had development approved on the promise of a new facility. They then demolished the existing stadium without any of these new stadiums ever having been built. This results in the loss of community leisure facilities and the permanent closure of the respective Speedway teams. Does that sound similar to the Swindon Motorsport Studley Grange arrangement that we're hearing about now? But it's not only Speedway. A thwarted attempt at Torquay Football Club resulted in Clark Osborne placing the club into administration and almost out of existence. Poorly applied planning obligations have allowed the same situations to begin in Swindon. Non-compliance with the Section 106 obligation for continuous use for Speedway is clearly evidenced in Section 3.8 of the Council response to this petition, which actually agrees that the stadium is no longer fit for Speedway and does not meet the SCB Speedway venue regulations. We therefore assert that nobody on this council has the capability to assess a venue's fitness for Speedway racing. So how can you help us? Peterborough, Rugby, Oxford and Torbay councils have all protected their leisure assets by rejecting applications for building on stadium footprints. Swindon can do the same. Oxford Council stood firm for 20 years, yet in 2024 it saw 3 Speedway teams operating to large crowds there in a multi-use venue. Swindon Speedway supporters, rather sadly, now have to take their custom along the A420 instead of contributing to our local economy and to a better Swindon. Has this council been told that the Abbey Stadium is not viable? If so, that is the deception that has been created to close the stadium. Our document highlights how Osborne and Terry Russell have stated Speedway is not viable, but that is their grounds for closure and for house building. Swindon Speedway is the town's second largest crowd puller, even larger than the theatre which you are currently supporting. UK Speedway crowds average around 1,000 people, Yet Swindon's last season saw crowds range between 1,200 to 3,000. Clark Osborne's evidence to Rugby Council stated that the cost of hosting a top league Speedway meeting was around £14,000. He described multiple income streams beyond admission charges alone. These included local business and national TV sponsorship, video streaming, programme and merchandise sales, along with food and beverage. So let's crunch those numbers a little bit. A crowd of 1,200 spending a conservative £25 each against Osborne's £14,000 costs gives a profit of around £15,000 per meeting. There is also an economic boost from people travelling to Swindon for Speedway. Shops, pubs, restaurants, even hotels can benefit, especially if major international and domestic events take place there again. A multi-use stadium scenario would also significantly contribute. Example uses could be outdoor concerts, indoor events, markets, perhaps sports pitches on the centre green, or even maybe a drive-in cinema. Clark Osborne actually has planning permission for one of those at Poole Stadium already. Is that unviable? Or is that statement there to facilitate the loss of the Abbey Stadium for housing? Swindon Council has a proud record of supporting sport, and Bob has told you about those earlier on. And these are all commendable. But Swindon Speedway were national champions 5 times. No other local sporting team even comes close to that. So why isn't the council supporting the town's most successful sporting team? Why aren't the needs of Swindon Speedway's community treated with the same focus and in the local plan? Why are the council supporting £75 million of heritage and theatre expenditure, but nothing for Speedway? Swindon was a Speedway town for 70 years. Is this a record you want to consign to history? Do rapacious developers come before the Swindon community? Or are you like other councils who will protect a heritage asset and work with the community to return the sport? Or will you drive the final nail into Swindon Speedway? Which of those will be your legacy? Thank you.
In line with Section 7.2 of the Council Petition Scheme, I will now invite the ward members to address Council on this petition as it relates to a local matter particularly affecting their specific ward. Councillors, you each have up to 5 minutes to speak, and I will call upon you individually. Councillor Daniel Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'd like to, I have a speech written out here, but I'd like to just take the opportunity firstly to thank the first public question we received this evening. I've never seen a leader try so hard to talk down and distance himself from some of the things he claims his administration has done, achievements that he has stood up and been proud of in an effort to make out that there's nothing that they could do to help Speedway. So that's quite an achievement, so thank you very much on that. But a bit of trivia about myself to start with. I actually spent a large portion of my life living in Ipswich. I've heard a rumour that another councillor in this room may have also. And as a result, I'm likely the only person here who had the pleasure of watching the Ipswich Witches at Foxhall Stadium, as well as the Robins at the stadium we all know and love. Although I never got the opportunity to see them competing against each other, something I hope I may one day be able to do. My first memories of the Abbey Stadium and the Speedway was being taken there by my father on many occasions to watch Speedway and banger racing, although I hear they didn't get on too well together. One of the most vivid memories was being told by my father not to stand on that first corner, and of course, not listening to him and getting hit by all the small stones and dirt. Anyone who made this mistake will remember it too. It's memories like these and a million more that take place like this. It's memories like these and a million more that make places like this important to our communities. Places to meet, socialise, relax after a hard day's work. These are the things that we are losing at an alarming rate. With the oasis on the rocks, we can ill afford to see another one of our town's leisure facilities lost, one that's famous around the world. With that said, thankfully, just like the Oasis and the Save the Oasis group fighting for its corner, we have the Swindon Needs Speedway group fighting for this too. And what are they fighting for? To make sure the conditions imposed by my predecessors to save the site are met in full to the standards recognised by Speedway's governing body. And work with them to guarantee a place for Speedway in this town, so in the future my son can make the same mistakes that I made and stand on that corner too, after I tell him not to. So for those reasons, I ask you all here tonight to support this petition. And thank you for everybody that signed it and those for bringing it forward tonight. Thank you very much.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As one of 3 councillors for St Andrews, I'd also like to thank the petitioners for bringing this forward. To be fair, I don't think there actually is much political disagreement on the Abbey Stadium. The leader, Councillor Small as well, much like their predecessors, Councillor Sumner and David Rannard, have generally, I think, kept us up to date with events at the Abbey Stadium. And whilst we may not always agree on everything, I do appreciate that and I want to put that on record. The conditions have been discussed. In a briefing we had with council officers, they confirmed to me that the conditions put on the Abbey Stadium a decade ago were the strongest they absolutely could have been given the relevant planning legislation at the time. It's simply not an accurate retelling of history to say the council could have imposed much harsher conditions on Gaming International. I also asked for details into the recent investigation into planning enforcement for possible breaches of the site, and was told in that meeting that the report was too detailed and couldn't be shared with me in full as a councillor. To this day, I still find that mystifying. Let me be clear, we're talking about the report that concluded there were no planning breaches at the stadium, despite the fact the stadium remains currently unable to host Speedway and houses have been built and are now occupied in the 3rd stage of housing. This report is quite possibly a smoking gun, one that would definitively prove if the developers were ever acting with purpose to deliver a redeveloped stadium as set out by the conditions or not. So the big question is where we go from here. Number one, as the petitioners alluded to and Councillor Adams alluded to, residents will be very sceptical about any plans to build a new venue outside of the borough. Swindon Speedway should be in Swindon, and in Swindon, we all know it can only realistically be held at the Abbey Stadium. Talk of a new or bigger facility may excite some, but to Speedway fans, and particular to me, St Andrews residents, know that this is a well played out tactic similar to those used in the closure of several other Speedway clubs by Gaming International, right down to the pre-announcement of Greyhounds pulling out, which I believe still to this date has not happened. Put simply, many believe the new plans are a smokescreen to try and leverage Swindon Borough Council into accepting the loss of Speedway by dropping the requirement for leisure, thereby facilitating more house building. To be clear, in St Andrews, 50% of all the houses in St Andrews have been built after 2010. This is not about opposing house building. We know more housing will likely follow north of Tadpole in the coming years. This is less about NIMBYs versus YIMBYs. It's about the loss of a leisure asset and potentially rewarding an actor that many residents and particularly Speedway fans feel has acted in bad faith from the start. The report on the breaches at the Abbey Stadium, in my opinion, must be released in full to the public and without amendments. When myself and colleagues are on record originally calling for the development to be investigated for planning enforcement breaches, we did so with the expectation that the genuine and hard to refute planning concerns would actually be addressed. Avoiding this transparency only creates further intrigue by Speedway fans and by St Andrews residents. Finally, I say to the petitioners and to supporters of Speedway in Swindon that as much as we would like, the future of Speedway will not be decided by this council. I think we can all agree we'd certainly like to help facilitate that, but no one can force a Speedway club to operate there if it does not wish. Until now, the assumption from SBC and Gaming International is that Speedway alone cannot be viable on the site. Presenting a viable business case for Swindon Speedway and motivating the community that supports Speedway will be crucial to what will decide this. Current planning conditions are absolutely clear that this land can and should be used for Speedway now, which is a leisure activity. The club should announce its intentions to enter a venture with other clubs or leisure activities to continue to operate on the site and present a credible business case. If Gaming International then could not work within the leisure parameters of the site,
You
there
have
are others
30
who
seconds.
could. Sorry, I appreciate. Right at the end. And then it would be Gaming International's choice to use the site as originally intended or to sell it. Thank you.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and show my appreciation for the more than 2,000 citizens who put their name to this petition. I believe petitions play an important function in a vibrant democracy, and I believe the views should be listened to, they should be reflected upon and responded to with respect. I therefore in turn hope that my response will be seen as being delivered with positive intent. Before representing the community of St Andrews, and as someone who lives a short 10-minute walk away from the stadium, I was baffled by the lack of progress in the return of Speedway, as well as astounded by the adjacent housing development. Like so many others, I asked myself, how has this been allowed to happen in plain sight? If I'm honest, I may even have considered signing the petition had it been presented a few years ago. I am not, though, the type of politician that adopts certain positions purely for political expediency. Do I think it's beholden for us to be genuinely curious and open-minded? Absolutely. However, as part of this process, I have tried to talk to the subject matter experts and see what is possible, not just desirable. We all would want to see a thriving Speedway, and if the points outlined were possible, you would have my full support. Sadly, after discussing with officers, I have concluded that it's not. Several questions were asked. Do we have legislative powers to mandate a private company to undertake the activities? Regrettably not. Have they satisfied the levels required by the various milestones within the planning consent to enable the residential development? Well, yes, but the absolute minimum level. Does this mean that the stadium could operate commercially immediately? Again, sadly, no. Only enough to start the process if Gaming International deemed this was a viable proposition. As we know, it has been over 4 years since we have seen Speedway operating at the stadium, and I remain committed to the objectives of those who brought this petition forward. But in terms of the specific details called upon in this petition, regrettably, I'm unable to support it in its current form.
Councillor Robbins, please can you respond to the petition and move the proposed council's response to it?
Happy to move.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second, please.
Councillor Robbins, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak. I just want to say a huge thank you to the team for organising the petition, bringing it forward and speaking so passionately about it, and to thank them for the document that they provided to all of the members of the council. I understand that you won't be hugely happy with the response as we've tabled it, but I think it is really important for us to recognise a few of the points. So the financial situation facing this council is extremely severe. We have got an in-year position that we are fighting to get back under control, and we have a significant gap in the funding for next year. And as been mentioned by one of the other questioners, over 80% of our budget is being used to support vulnerable adults and children in the borough who need our support. And whilst that is the case, it is incredibly difficult for us to do more. But I also think there's a bit of a contradiction in some of what you were saying. It is very clear that the only option for bringing Speedway back in the short term is to do it at the Abbey Stadium. And you've made it very clear that you don't think that Clark Osborne is a fit and proper person to be doing that. We can't operate Speedway. We are not Speedway operators. We are a borough council. And we don't want to put our money, especially really scarce resources, into someone. Clark Osborne is not someone that we would be choosing to work with. There is a long history of Speedway failing in other places, and it wouldn't be a sensible thing for us to be investing money into. We are very clear that we will do everything we can in our power, if we can afford it, to support Speedway should an opportunity come up where we can do that. But at the moment, I can't see one. If there was an easy option, it's like Councillor Chandler was saying, there is political support for Speedway, but there isn't an opportunity for us to help in any meaningful way at the moment. We do not have land that could be used as a Speedway course, and it just simply isn't something that we can do. We would love to help you, but we can't. We will do everything we can to make sure that the site is protected in the emerging local plan for leisure use, and if anyone else comes forward, and if Speedway is as viable as you were telling us, and you can make so much money out of it, if anyone else comes forward wanting to run Speedway in the town, we would be delighted to hear from them, and we would offer them every support that we can. But at the moment, there isn't someone who is willing to do that, or has a piece of land where they are willing to do that. If that changes, we will be right there trying to support you, and we will do everything that we can through the planning system to try and make sure that that happens. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bushell, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve, please.
I formally open up the debate on the proposed council's response to the petition as moved. Are there any members who wish to speak?
Sorry, just a point of information. I just want to ask if there's members who are on planning, do they put themselves in a difficult situation if they were to speak to this? Because obviously this is something that's going to be quite ingrained in planning moving forward. So I'm not too sure whether the borough solicitor can just advise on that.
Members may speak on the terms of the petition, but what they must be cautious about is not judging any matters that may come before the planning committee at a later date. So it's a bit of a nuanced answer, and that's the best I can give you in terms of members' responses to this. The ultimate position is, should this come before a planning committee in terms of the planning enforcement matters, members must not have prejudged or predetermined anything in relation to that.
Councillor Heenan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with a personal and non-prejudicial interest, just listening and reflecting. I actually live half a mile away from the site, so I think it's prudent that I just make the declaration. It doesn't impact me, and I'm quite supportive either way. I understand the council is aware that a deal has been signed between the owners of Abbey Stadium and a financial institution for housing on a cleared stadium site. And being a cynic, I think an application for a new stadium will be made outside of Swindon, so we can't get involved with it, and be pointed to as the owner's commitment to Speedway. Then after permission for housing at Abbey Stadium is granted, the outer Swindon Stadium is refused or withdrawn, never to be heard from again. The site should be protected as a stadium and for leisure uses as the current local plan states, and can be strengthened. The council response is correct in that it is the private owner's decision to run Speedway. No council in the country runs Speedway. And we know that the Speedway licence to operate as a team has been handed back, so we need to find somebody who can legally operate and take part in the league. A new operator does need to come forward and find a way to do that. But if one is found, there is no site in Swindon capable of being used if we continue down the path that we are. And suggestions for other uses to be co-located at the site, including a nursery, don't appear to be seriously considered so that a viable business case can be drafted. No sport, whether it is football and county ground or Speedway at Abbey Stadium, is ever going to be able to survive as a single use. It has to be a multi-use site. So it doesn't appear that the site has been seriously marketed and taken into account. It is simply as Speedway and the dog track. But for the first time in the council response, it looks like the Abbey Stadium site will no longer be protected. Simply that it is the council's intention to not lose the potential of Speedway in or near Swindon. And this is the perfect time for the council to agree a strong position to protect the site and provide every incentive to restart the sport. For example, the petition requests that the council advise Swindon needs Speedway what leisure space is suitable for hosting Speedway if a dedicated stadium space cannot be offered, and include this in the local plan 2036. The council response fails to address this point from the fan group and the petitioners. And there's every perception that the council will be allowing houses on the site with a shrug and say, there's nothing we can do. You want to know what leisure space is suitable in the town. We won't tell you or engage with you. And the council leader's been quite clear and said that they'll do everything in their power and the site will be protected for leisure use. The petition response doesn't back those words. We can support what the petition is trying to do with its aims. This isn't about finance and asking the council to put money in. It isn't about the legalese and some of the issues around the site and planning permission and the likes. There is more that we can do as a council, as community leaders, and leading from the front, and try and broker a way forward on this. Swindon Speedway deserves better.
Councillor Bushell would like to speak.
I think only to express my sympathy for the petitioners and their aims and objectives. It's been a very long time since I attended the Speedway in Swindon. Most recently as a Swindon town supporter, my awareness of Speedway has been listening to commentary of away games on Saturday afternoon on BBC Wiltshire and sort of following the Speedway team that way, and it clearly is one of our most successful sporting teams and something that's brought a lot of pride to the town. I think, as many speakers have said already, there is political support for bringing back Speedway. We are happy to do everything we can to support that objective, but our powers are incredibly limited, as Councillor Mills, Robbins, Chandler and others have pointed out, hence our response to the motion.
Is Council content to agree the response to the... Apologies again. Councillor Robbins?
Thank you very much. If I can just thank Councillor Heenan for his interjection. He made some really important points. Obviously, as someone who was chair of Planning Committee back in 2011 when some of these things went through, he is someone who speaks with some authority on this. But as I've said, we will continue to do everything we can to support the campaign. And if there is concrete actions that we can take, we will try to do them. Thank you very much.
Is Council content to agree the response to the petition as set out in paragraphs 3.6 to 3.11 on pages 23 to 24 of the agenda papers pack? All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? I declare the vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 9, which is update on actions from council motions. I would draw members' attention to the report on pages 27 to 30 of the agenda papers pack. Leader, will you please present the report?
Happy to present as tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any members who wish to speak? Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. Just quickly to thank the leader and to update council further that now I've had an opportunity to discuss with Councillor Adam Cover, Councillor Dixon and Councillor Adorable Sheikh. That has been agreed and the scope of it has been placed on the working plan.
Is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Would you like to speak, Councillor Bushell?
Nothing to add.
Is Council content to note the Leader's report? All those in favour, please show. I declare the vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is motions. There are 3 motions for which notice was given. Legend on the bench, magic roundabout, tax on jobs. Can I invite Councillor Barbara Perry to move the first motion, legend on the bench, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, with agreement of the Council, I would like to move an amended motion which has been circulated in the additional papers pack.
Is Council content to accept amendment motion? Councillor Barbara Perry, please can I invite you to move your amended motion, legend on the bench, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Should we not have a seconder yet? Is that it? No?
Could you just confirm, please, if you move?
I move the amended motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'm happy to second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barbara Perry, will you please introduce your motion? You have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not the first motion I have brought to Council in support of mental health, but this one is very different to my previous one. Whilst I am bringing forward this motion, the credit for this must go to 2 gentlemen, my good friend and former work colleague, Mr. Roman Petrowski, who brought Legend on the Bench to my attention and asked for my support to get Swindon involved, and former Swindon Town player, Mr. Mickey Hazard. Mickey turned a family tragedy into a selfless, thoughtful and caring scheme to raise awareness of mental health and to help those in need to have a safe space to sit and either gather their thoughts quietly, take in the beauty of nature around them, or to sit and enjoy a chat with others, either sharing their worries or distracting them, at least for a little while. These are not simply benches, though. They are illuminated benches, powered by solar and built-in generators, with the powerful meaning from darkness to light. The charity received a generous donation of £10,000 from the Swindon branch of NatWest Bank. I would like to hereby thank Leanne at NatWest and the bank for their generosity. This money will be funding benches in Swindon. As someone who has and continues to champion this town and our football club, it is an honour and a privilege to bring forward this motion, which, if carried, will see the very first of the Swindon benches at the county ground. I understand the charity has spoken with Frank Donachie and Councillors Neil Hopkins and Chris Watts, and approval has been granted for a bench to be installed in Lydia Park, and that other locations are being considered. I would like to hereby thank the gentlemen and the South Parish Council for their support and hope that this will encourage others to get behind the scheme. When each of the benches is unveiled, it is called a reveal. The benches are ordered by the charity and delivered the day before the reveal. Mickey has attended every reveal across the country so far, so it would definitely be acceptable and appropriate for the leader to invite him to all of the reveals in Swindon, in my opinion, including the one at the county ground. The club may and probably will also invite him, but I guess better to receive 2 invites than none at all. The potential for antisocial behaviour has been considered. Of the 14 benches that have been installed across the country, not a single one has encountered antisocial behaviour or vandalism. People have been very respectful of the benches and the meaning of them. However, the charity would repair any benches should any vandalism occur. Legend on the Bench is such a wonderful and thoughtful initiative, and I urge you all to support this amended motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lecoit-Greeny, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I'd like to speak now, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this motion. I wholeheartedly support its sentiment and purpose. As a clinical lead in local mental health services, I am dedicated to supporting people and families navigating the complexities of mental health. I'm acutely aware of the urgency of the mental health crisis being experienced locally and nationally. We don't tend to do very well at talking about death in our collective British culture. 84% of us find it really uncomfortable to talk about death and dying, and yet suicide is the leading cause of death in people under the age of 35 in the UK, and 5 young people are lost to suicide every day. The devastating impact of death by suicide reaches far beyond the individual, leaving families, friends and communities with unanswered questions, profound grief, and often deep shame, blame and guilt. In turn, their own risks of suicide are increased. Every day in my work, I speak with people experiencing suicidal ideation, planning harm and acting on these plans. I've worked with young people as young as 8 years old, sharing meaningfully that they no longer wish to be alive. Every day, I remind the young, old, and in-between people that I work with that they are loved, they matter, and they are important, because we know that connection and conversation saves lives. Initiatives like Legend on the Bench meet people where they are at, in the heart of their communities. I have stated before in this chamber that we all have a brain, thus we all have mental health. We all, here in this chamber, have a duty of care, a collective moral and practical responsibility to champion mental health awareness and to take collective action to reduce inequalities in access to support, prioritise early intervention, adequate funding for mental health services, and an unwavering commitment to break down stigma, including the stigma of suicide. This sentiment is bolstered by our Swindon Plans Build a Fairer Swindon initiative, which champions the improvement of health and well-being. By endorsing this motion, we reaffirm our collective commitments and acknowledge the incredible work of people like Mickey Hazard, whose bravery in sharing his experience of personal loss has inspired a movement to save lives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I formally open up the debate on the amendment motion as proposed. Are there any members who wish to speak? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Though it's not mentioned directly in the motion, the timing of it is excellent, coming as it does in Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. The aim of this month is to encourage men to seek support and talk about their mental health. Because, for example, as my colleague said, suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 50 in the UK. It is also relevant as we can welcome today a new men's health strategy announced today by the Health Secretary. One of the leading charities for raising funds and awareness for men's mental health is an organisation called Movember, who have raised almost £1 billion over the last 21 years for men's health projects, whether that is working, for example, with Prostate Cancer UK or on suicide prevention. At this point, I should probably declare an interest, if it were not immediately obvious, as this is the 3rd year I've taken part in Movember, and I'd like to thank all of those who have already donated and encourage anyone to check out my social media or message me directly for the links to do so, while also taking time to donate to the Mayor's charities, of course. I had not heard of Legend on the Bench before, so I'd like to thank those proposing this motion for raising awareness of a worthwhile charity and an important cause, and I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Valinder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I also want to thank Councillor Parry and Councillor LaCoit-Graney for bringing this motion forward, because we cannot deny the devastating impact mental health struggles and suicidal thoughts have on individuals, families and entire communities. Tragically, we lose far too many lives each year, and the impact is wider than that. The recent reports of the Health and Wellbeing Board highlighted that that more than 130 people are affected by each individual death by suicide. We have a critical role in improving the mental health of our residents. Mental health should not just be an afterthought, but a priority across all areas of responsibility. Whether it's through providing accessible resources, offering support networks, or raising awareness, we must do more to ensure no one suffers in silence. There's an urgent need to break down that stigma surrounding mental health, creating that space where people can talk openly about their struggles without fear of judgment or isolation. By doing so, we can offer hope to those who feel like there is none. Now, our previous mental health champion, Curtis Flux, won the Mental Health Award at the Swindon and Wiltshire Health and Social Care Awards for his work. As the Council's champion, he looked at children's mental health, including earlier intervention work, mental health leads in schools, our relationships with local support services and charities, local play park improvements for children with additional needs, and the trauma-informed practice training to staff within Swindon Borough Council. He saw those numbers of mental health leads in local schools increase. Our relationships with support services and charities improve, and the trauma-informed practice training saw great results, with over 85% of participants saying the training was relevant, interesting, very useful, and will support them in their work with parents, children and young people, and staff supervision. Over 800 participants attended this training over multiple sessions. Now, I'm really, really glad to see that this motion has been brought forward on a cross-party basis, but I'm particularly disappointed to see that the only way we could ensure that was to drop the line about resurrecting the previous administration's mental health champion to help raise the profile of mental health and wellbeing awareness in the local community. As a local authority, we have a crucial role to play in improving the mental health of everyone in our local community and to help tackle some of the widest and most entrenched inequalities in health. Mental health should be a priority across all of the local authority's areas of responsibility, and there's an ever-growing need for awareness of mental health struggles and the impacts that suicidal thoughts have on people and their loved ones. Thank you.
Councillor Barbara Perry, would you like to sum up?
Just to thank everyone for their support. Other than that, I have nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Is Council content to agree the motion? Legend on the bench. All those in favour, please show. I declare the vote carried. Moving on to the magic roundabout motion. Can I invite Councillor Kevin Perry to move the motion, please?
I move, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kevin Perry, will you please introduce the motion? You have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Swindon Town is known for many great things. When you speak to people outside of Swindon and you tell them you come from Swindon, they say, with a big smile on their face, the magic roundabout. When my parents first told me about the magic roundabout, I was excited to see it, but I was disappointed when I did, because I was expecting to see Dougal and his friends. The magic roundabout is a genius piece of engineering, but isn't particularly exciting to look at, and we can change this. My vision is to create our own Swindon characters to sit right in the centre of the roundabout. These would be designed by local children and funded by businesses and the community, bringing the roundabout to life and really putting Swindon on the map. Some doubted the Swindog, said it would never take place and never take off, but we have seen how successful this was. A perfect example of what can be achieved with the right support. We have seen many different towns and cities across Europe change areas that were previously relatively unattractive into great tourist attractions. And one example of this is a Mushroom Street in Alicante. In 2010, Swindon was the first town in the world to be twinned with Disney, the Magic Kingdom. And this was because of Rebecca Warren's poem that featured the Magic Roundabout. The Mickey Mouse trophy in the Mayor's Parlour, which represents twinning, has always caught the eye of children and has excited them to learn that our town was once twinned with Disney. This motion goes towards the Council's plans of building a better Swindon. By getting the support of businesses and working with schools, we can make this happen. It's nearly Christmas. Let the magic begin, and let's put the magic into the magic roundabout. Thank you.
Councillor Barbara Perry, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
Reserve, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I formally open up the debate on the motion as proposed. Are there any members who wish to speak? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you very much. I'm not intending to speak for long, just to congratulate the Swindon Magic Roundabout for winning the coveted UK Roundabout of the Year award. If we're already winners, do we really need to make it even better and embarrass other places more? On a serious note, this isn't a motion that we're going to support. I understand the sentiment behind it, and I can see that it's something to do. But simply at the moment, resources are so stretched within the council that we haven't got money to put into this, and we haven't got officer time to put into this either. Officers are working incredibly hard, trying to keep the organisation going, make the improvements that we're trying to make through the Swindon plan, and we simply don't have the resources to be able to put into this project. if there is another way of doing it and finding sponsorship, more than happy for people to investigate that and find ways for it to happen. But this isn't something that we think that we should be spending valuable officer time and resources on at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a bit surprised that, as far as I'm aware, no one connected with the motion actually approached officers for advice on this. One of the biggest concerns in relation to any highways issue is the possibility of distraction. I mean, I'm already concerned that at the Magic Roundabout there's a big screen that is already a distraction for people using the roundabout. Yes, there lots of people come to Swindon just to experience the Magic Roundabout. What we don't need to have is additional distractions when they're first trying to negotiate what to people who are new to it is quite complicated. To those of us who use it every day, it's not complicated. It's a very simple and effective mechanism for a series of road junctions. I'm surprised also that this issue was not brought in to one of our committees where it could be considered. I would have thought that it's the sort of issue that could be discussed at Build a Better Swindon, probably, where it could have been considered carefully before expectations being raised. The very fact that the issues around the motion appear in the paper in advance of the council meeting, and I know there's probably a slow news day and anything can grab attention. But I just wonder if it's a matter of trying to gain publicity rather than actually do something effective for the town. In terms of one of the issues, I think some ideas were raised about the possibility of using Magic Roundabout figures and to reflect what was at one stage, I think, a BBC programme. The fact is that the IP, the intellectual property in relation to the Magic Roundabout, was sold, I think, in around 2007 to a company called Intara Limited. And I think anybody who wanted to use anything in connection with the Magic Roundabout would have to wade through and negotiate arrangements in relation to intellectual property. So I just mention that because that's a significant complication. The reality is we're running a local authority with limited cash and very limited staff resources. And this is not something that I believe we have spare staff capacity to devote time to. The highway staff that we have to be fully focused on actually delivering for Swindon the safest possible roads, a road system that we can have. And I don't think putting more attention on the Magic Roundabout, which, as the leaders already said, has already won the best roundabout in the country. I don't know where we go from there. So I really don't think that this motion brings any benefit to the town whatsoever, and I certainly will not be supporting it.
Councillor Strykowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for a lot of the reasons Councillor Hopkins has outlined, I'm not sure that this works as a motion, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't work as an idea, right? So I don't know if you know, but there is a network of creatives and people from the culture sector in Swindon. It was started last year, and it is actually called Magic Swindon, very appropriately. And the people like the organizers of Paint Fest are part of that network, and we work continuously to do all kinds of cool stuff around Swindon. Now, the surface of the Magic Roundabout, both for safety issues and because they just literally got redone 2 months ago, all of the road markings, this is not the time to be investing in anything more into that. But if we wanted to take an idea offline to work with the creative sector on how to improve the public realm around the roundabout, which I think, I mean, it's a tricky kind of space. You've got a garage on one end, and it's not very attractive, like the whole area around it. So if we wanted to work on that collaboratively with the culture sector in Swindon, I would be very open to having that conversation.
Councillor Barbara Perry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the comments. I would just like to object to Councillor Hopkins' suggestion that this was purely for publicity. Anybody who knows either of us, and particularly through our service as mayors of this town, will know that everything that we do is from the heart and certainly not for publicity. So I really do take great exception to that and put you right on that, Councillor Hopkins. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Kevin Perry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, yes, disappointed. Just a couple of points. I have actually previously spoken to the highways officer, so that is incorrect in what you're saying. I won't name the officer, but if you want me to tell you outside a meeting, happy to do so. So that is incorrect. Councillor Hopkins obviously hasn't read the motion or listened to what I said, because I said about working with businesses to actually fund that. The motion says that it will go to a report to Cabinet, so it's what you have requested, so that could be done. So it's you've obviously not taken it on board, I don't think, properly. You haven't read it properly and understood it. It's a shame that you're not supporting Swindon. I think, build a better Swindon, I think it'd be fantastic for Swindon, so I'm disappointed that you've said that, but take on board and happy to work if you want to work to do something differently.
Is Council content to agree to the motion on the magic roundabout? All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? I declare the vote carried. Sorry, lost. That brought a smile on your face. Okay. Moving on to the tax on jobs motion. Can I invite Councillor Gary Sumner to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I so move the motion.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Mr Mayor, I so second.
Councillor Sumner, will you please introduce the motion? You have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the Conservative group continues to champion Swindon's prospects, I know that the Labour group also have ambitions for growing Swindon's economy, and yet our Labour government and the Chancellor have made that job much tougher. At the same time, costs for our suppliers in the care sector will put our already strained budget position for next year into even greater peril. The CBI were one of the latest organisations to call out the Chancellor's £25 billion tax raid on businesses. The Institute of Directors has said that young people will be particularly vulnerable as employers pull back on plans to hire or retain staff in an environment which has become increasingly bleak. You don't get the larger businesses of the future without supporting smaller businesses of today. UK growth has stalled under Labour, and the OBR analysis of the autumn budget shows public spending £50 billion higher than planned in the March budget. Less than £10 billion of the overspending is down to the previous government. Labour has already created a £40 billion black hole in 4 months, and with this tax on jobs through the national insurance increase for employers, there seems little likelihood of growing our economy in a meaningful way, whilst benefit bills will increase due to job losses. The social and human costs of reducing the prospects of young people cannot be quantified. Please support us in this motion and send the message about our disappointment to the Chancellor. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hinnan, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I will reserve my right to speak.
I formally open up the debate on the motion as proposed. Are there any members who wish to speak? Robbins?
Thank you very much. I don't think it's a massive shock to anyone to say that the Labour group won't be supporting this motion. And I think there's some quite spectacular gaslighting going on from our Conservative colleagues at the moment. I understand that there are challenges in this. The government were very clear. They spent a lot of time rolling the ground, as they say, for this budget because they knew it was going to be exceptional. But the reason it was exceptional is the state of the country that they found that they took over. It's a bit like when we took over the council in 2022. We found that children's services was inadequate. We found that the housing department hadn't seen the sort of maintenance and investment that it needed to be able to have Swindon residents thriving. We found an organisation where confidence and morale was on its knees. We haven't finished the job of turning that around, but hopefully you've seen from the peer review and the resident survey and the staff survey that we're starting to make some progress on it. And that the Labour government finds themselves in the same place. So I'm just going to read out a few things that rose under the Tories. National debt went up. Government borrowing went up. The trade deficit went up. NHS waiting lists went up. Sewage in our rivers went up. Children in temporary accommodation went up. Homelessness went up. Rents went up. The scale of deprivation in our country went up. The number of evictions went up. Poverty rates went up. Destitution rates went up. The number of food banks went up. The number of people using food banks went up. Food parcels having to be delivered to children went up. Malnutrition went up. Children with stunted growth went up. Children sick due to food insecurity went up. Business insolvencies went up. The level of corruption in our country went up. Taxes went up. The number of soldiers in the armed forces went down. Societal division went up. And knife crime went up. And because of all of those reasons, when the new government came in, they saw the state of public services and the way that they had been left by a Tory government, and they decided they needed to do something about it. And that's what happened with that budget. Everyone accepts that there are going to be winners and losers. It is no wonder that some of the losers on it are unhappy about it. Jeremy Clarkson is unhappy. Why is Jeremy Clarkson unhappy? Because he wanted to have a nice little tax dodge so that he didn't have to pay inheritance tax. So he bought some land. Who else is unhappy about that? Oh, James Dyson. Why is he unhappy? Because he owns more land than he owns business space in this country. There are tons of people who have invested in our farmland, not to farm it, but to avoid taxes. There has had to be change. There are winners and losers. The national insurance contributions one is going to have an impact, but there are plenty of other measures in that budget that are going to have an impact on growth that the Office of Budget Responsibility haven't taken into account. So we are not going to support your motion, and I'd suggest that you have a little bit of humility and think about what your government did before you come in and have a go at the Labour government after just a few months when they're trying to clean up your mess.
Councillor Chandler.
Mr Mayor, I'm sure the government are grateful for the endorsement of the leader and him being the last one left in the trenches, as it were, to the reputation of this Labour government. This Labour government is historically unpopular. As I sit here right now, the petition to call a general election right now is vastly approaching 3 million people. Those are the people that are angry, Councillor Robbins, not Jeremy Clarkson. It's the millions of working people who have suffered from higher tax rises and breaking promises that your government made. Firstly, I want to start on a positive note, though, and that is I want to congratulate Councillor Nakana on a fantastic win. There's been talk of resident surveys and a lot of good comms actually going out about the Let's Talk Swindon event, but we shouldn't forget what was the biggest Let's Talk Swindon event recently, and that, of course, was the Rob Boncini by-election. By the number of people that actually participated in, it will eclipse any resident survey. Yes, Councillor Nakana won because she is a dedicated and hard-working person and ran a very good campaign. It's also true that the Labour Council itself took voters for granted in that election. The Oasis, the phantom council tax freeze, and frequent problems with waste collections over the last 2 years were all brought up as problems on the doorsteps. But these things were also true in May, where we lost.
Are you speaking to the motion?
Just like the leader did.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I don't think that's consistent. I don't think the leader addressed the motion substantially at all. And please, can I continue? I'm about to go on to the national insurance implications. Thank you. This tectonic shift is because of the Labour government. What disappoints me about the Chancellor's announcements regarding national insurance is that she, of all people, should understand the influence she has to drive macroeconomic signals. Lying about the economy and talking Britain down generally all will have demonstrable and catastrophic implications in the economy. These OBR signs that are in the motion are far from extensive, but are not just signs of the economy slowing, they're also signs of productivity decay. In Planning Committee recently, we saw an example of how this could bear out locally. 2 Labour councillors proposed, with decent, albeit I think very misguided intentions, that we should reject an application on the basis that it was a cattle shed. The rationale was that the council should echo the PM's sentiments at COP29 by not supporting more beef production. Common sense did prevail, but while it feels like farmers live much more difficult lives under Labour, the economic truth is restricting supply of something does not increase the demand for it, it makes it more expensive. And that 1% on the production of things like food can have 4 to 6% increases on the cost of goods for consumers. That means the poor, that means working families, that means vulnerable people. Farming is obviously just one example. The elderly, small business owners, and let's not ignore the millions of working people who will be hit by these tax hikes. Yet another broken promise by Labour. The tax on working people will pay for Labour's political choices, and that is the reason why I support this motion.
Councillor Butcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion, as submitted by the Conservatives, contains many fabrications and rewriting of history. It seems they have not done the self-reflection they so desperately need to after losing the recent general election in such a spectacular fashion. They say that the government inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7. Mr. Mayor, the truth of that is the UK's annual growth last year was among the worst in the G7, and the UK has seen comparatively slower growth since the pandemic than most other G7 countries. If the economy has grown, it is because they shrunk it so much compared to our closest peers. They say that mortgage interest rates are falling, and I must ask, Mr. Mayor, falling from where? The answer is from the eye-watering highs of the disastrous mini-budget of 2022 that I and many other residents in my ward and the rest of Swindon still feel the effects of in our monthly mortgage payments. As for the rest of their points, it seems they have little faith in the ability of businesses to generate growth. Much like when the minimum wage was first introduced and the Conservatives argued that it would lead to low growth, they were wrong then and they are wrong now. I thought they were meant to be the party of business. It seems they embody the view of their previous PM, Boris Johnson, when it comes to business. We all remember what he had to say. I hope that those on the opposition benches can try and bring some motions based in fact and reality in the future if they want to be able to engage in good debate and not something with such obvious political spin as this. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just astonishing how quickly, really, we've gone back to the Labour of old. We have the leader standing up in front of us, attacking some of the most successful and famous people in the country, people that provide entertainment to millions of people, jobs to thousands and billions of investment into this country. So it's really sad to see such a rapid decline in the Labour Party just so quickly. But if the Labour leader wants to talk about what's gone up during his administration, we just need to look at the allowances they voted for earlier on in the year. Funny where the money comes from for those things. None of them can look me in the eye right now. While in this room we see Labour voting to increase their pay, well, outside these walls in the real world, where our residents are feeling the frigid force of Labour's cuts to the winter fuel allowance, we now see their focus of their attack swing in full force to the hard-working people of this town. Now with job forecasts slashed, employees' pay rises put on hold, and the spectre of job losses in the spring, all thanks to this budget. There is now these are the very real effects of the Labour government's budget on this nation and on this town. This isn't what people voted for. This isn't what they thought would happen. We've heard time and time again how the leader can't do this, can't do that, because he has no money. So all we're asking the leader of this council to do is write to the Chancellor on behalf of the residents that he represents. And this is free. I'll even get you the postage stamp if necessary. If he can't do this, what can he do for the people of Swindon? I ask you to put our town, our country before party and support the people of Swindon.
Councillor Wallander.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Now, Councillor Sumner touched on the OBR analysis, and we saw, as sure as night follows day, Labour councillors stand up and trotting out the usual lines. I was surprised to see that no one had mentioned the £22 billion black hole tonight, but I guess that's an admission that the £40 billion from the OBR is probably correct. Now, the Labour government's increase in employer national insurance contributions is a disastrous blow for businesses across the country. It's going to add financial burden facing employers, especially small businesses who are already grappling with rising costs. Raising taxes on businesses means the government is going to stifle growth, discourage hiring and risking job losses at a time when economic recovery should be the priority. And every one of us in this room knows the financial situation this council faces. We've had the briefing from the Finance Director earlier this month, and we've seen the email from the Chief Exec to officers outlining cost-saving measures. This decision is going to add £2.5 million of costs to the council, which is almost an additional third on top of the current total reported gap. And now I know there are the possibility that central government is going to be offering that money, but it is still 2.5 million more on the council's books. And unlike Labour's tax hikes, the Conservative government's support for business during the pandemic was a game changer. The Labour group here seem to have forgotten about the COVID pandemic, Ukraine. We've seen furlough schemes, grants, loans that kept businesses alive when they were on the brink, protecting jobs and preventing mass closures. The Tories understood that saving businesses was crucial for the economy's survival. And this isn't the only poor decision in Labour's budget. Their decision to scrap the winter fuel allowance is a betrayal of the very people it was meant to protect, a cold-hearted move that punishes the elderly, the vulnerable, and the low-income families who rely on this support to stay warm during the bitter winter months. Labour's changes to inheritance tax for farmers are a direct attack on the future of British farming. By slashing exemptions and increasing tax burdens, with many struggling to pass on their livelihoods to the next generation, they're going to threatening to force family farms into closure. This move is a betrayal of farmers who have worked tirelessly to feed the nation, and it risks undermining the backbone of rural Britain. Now, as Councillor Chandler alluded to, we're already seeing the buyer's remorse for this Labour government play out, with this general election petition almost hitting 3 million signatures. In the Prime Minister's own words, "I'm not surprised people want a rerun." Perhaps that's why we've seen the Conservative Party take the lead in the polls this month. After 5 months of free gear Keir, Rachel from Accounts' budget of broken promises, and Keir Starmer the farmer harmer, they've shown that Labour have said whatever it takes to get into power. And we've seen that here in Swindon too, don't forget. We all remember February's Labour Lies council tax rise. We've all witnessed the start of a disastrous Labour government that is putting their strong economic inheritance from the previous Conservative government at risk. Higher taxes, policies that hurt businesses, the elderly and farmers, the Labour government is clearly out of touch with the needs of the British people. And I'd strongly urge all councillors tonight to take a stance, back this motion and support our local businesses. Thank you.
Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've heard a couple of figures now tonight for this petition, one of just over 2 million and one of just over 3 million. May I just remind the Tory group of the petition which over 6 million people signed, calling for a rerun of the Brexit referendum. What was their response to that? What was their government's response to that, despite the fact that their own Prime Minister had their lawyer admit in court that they knew the referendum was seriously flawed, and they just ignored it? Kind of ironic, which is a lot of what I've got to say tonight seems very ironic, because when I think about Brexit, there's various reports. There was one out earlier this year that said if it wasn't for Brexit, tax revenue in the UK would be 40 billion higher. 1.8 million more jobs in this country, but for Brexit. But I guess really what makes me feel very ironic is coming here this evening to listen to the Tory group complaining about potential
Councillor
job
Poole,
losses.
are we speaking to the motion?
Yeah, I am complaining about potential job losses when I've spent most of my week dealing with the impact of the last Tory government's ideologically motivated failure to address the funding crisis in higher education, which will mean that by the end of this year, around 10,000 of my colleagues in higher education will have lost their jobs or be about to lose their jobs. But just focusing very much on this tax rise, I have my concerns about it. Perhaps not for the reasons expressed by some people here. I fully accept that, you know, if you're going to improve public services, taxes have got to go up. I also fully accept that any tax rise is going to have an impact on the economy. People, you know, there might be fewer jobs, prices might go up, incomes might come down. My concerns actually focus around the connection between public services and the tax rise and the concept that people have in their own minds. I feel that separating it out to employers' national insurance contributions may be a step too far, and that people, ordinary people, will lose that connection between additional taxation paying for higher quality public services. But that said, I can't support this motion given the Tories' track record, so I'm quite happy to say that I'm going to be voting against it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Eck.
Councillor Mills.
Mr. Mayor, so here we are, 10 weeks after the last full council. Yet again, we find ourselves being presented with a deliberately provocative and highly political motion. And yet again, I'm finding myself having to ask opposition members to reflect on the central purpose and scope of local government. Mr. Mayor, I really want to elevate this chamber. I am inspired when I hear from passionate contributors whose primary motivation is simply to represent and champion their ward, as well as wanting the best for Swindon. But my goodness, what must our residents think when they see motions like this, whose only purpose is to score cheap political points? Oh, and before anyone asks, I'm certainly not afraid of engaging in debates. I'm proud of what our administration has achieved and the positive plans for Swindon going forward. So if you wish to debate them, bring it on. But do I think we should be debating topics that are outside of our control? Speaking personally, my response is absolutely not. And for as long as I am privileged enough to be elected to this chamber, Mr. Mayor, I will continue to take that position.
Councillor Strinkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm so sorry. I'm not as polished a political operator as my colleagues on the opposition benches, so I am not reading from a piece of paper. I'm actually speaking impromptu from the heart. Why do you make us do this to you guys? The unfunded tax cuts that killed this country's economy. I'm not even going back to Brexit. I know not everybody is old enough to remember. They were in 2022, y'all. A lettuce crashed this country into an iceberg in 2022. That's 2 years ago. The added unfunded tax cut that took 10 billion out of the economy, an act of calculated and deliberate political sabotage from a chancellor who knew that he was going to lose the next election, and cleaning up the mess of the hungry children and the malnourished teenager was not going to be his problem, was in March. No year, because it was in March this year. And now, when somebody is taking the courageous steps and the difficult decisions, remember who's old enough to remember difficult decisions? 2010, we must live within our means, notes in the Treasury, Gordon Brown saved the international financial system, and you all blamed him for it for 10 years. Anybody remember that? That's history, Councillor Chandler. That's history. Please don't heckle me. If I can contain myself when you are speaking, you can contain yourself when I am speaking.
Right.
As for this motion,
we need to stick to the motion.
It is ahistorical.
Point of order, my name has been mentioned. Should I have a right of reply?
It is insulting to the intelligence of the people in this chamber and to the people of Swindon.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. Just to say, I know I do read off paper. I wish I could be more polished, but I tend to spend more of my time as a councillor actually trying to advocate for residents. Yeah.
Right.
Excuse me.
No,
I just want to
no, let me finish first. Councillor Chandler, you will get a chance to speak. You will get a chance to speak. But all I'm asking, let's not do that. Have a decent conversation. Debate. Councillor Chandler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to add on that.
Councillor Weisinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What the Labour Party never liked to say is how much the Conservative government supported the country during COVID while it was in control and how it brought down inflation. Since July the 4th, inflation is on the increase. Labour promised to the country there would be no council tax rises if they were elected. So can the leader of this council declare if it will stick to the party promise made by Sir Keir Starmer that was used to win the general election and not to increase it in February? Highworth Town Council has just had to set its precept for the next fiscal year and has had to build an increase of over £11,000 just to cover the increases in the national insurance raised by the Labour government. Nobody knows how many more taxes this government will introduce, and even the Prime Minister and his Chancellor can't agree, according to recent articles in the newspaper. My request is that members in this chamber support Councillor Sumner's motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Miller-Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was quite surprised to hear reference made to a planning application that came before Planning Committee a few weeks ago. I suppose it was dragged in because it was about an agricultural an agricultural building. The Chamber's been told that the objection was because this application was for a cattle shed.
Councillor Miller-Berry, are you with the motion? We're talking about the tax.
I am picking up a point that was, I think, very misleadingly made by the Speaker. The problem was not that this was a cattle shed. No problem with the cattle shed. The problem was that no account had been taken of the amount of methane which would have been produced by the 150 young steers that were going to be kept in the sheds.
Councillor Miller-Berry, it doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry, I have been misrepresented by the gentleman who introduced this motion.
How?
The problem was not that he tells me the problem was that it was a cattle shed. The problem was that no account was taken in the application for the amount of methane.
No, you will have to stop there, Councillor Miller-Berry. I'm sorry, but doesn't seem right. So just talk on the tax on jobs, please.
I'm sorry, if the gentleman who introduced this motion can talk about this planning application and misrepresent what the problem was, I don't see why I shouldn't pick him up on it.
No, I don't think he mentioned any of the planning. So,
He said that the problem was that the application was for a cattle shed.
So
That was not
if
the
you want to
problem.
speak on the motion, please. If not, then we'll have to move on.
Very well. In order to compensate for the amount of methane which would be produced by those 150 steers, you would need 2,000 mature trees.
Right, we'll have to stop you there.
No reference was made to this.
We'll have to stop you there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to speak? Councillor Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll kind of wrap up with Councillor Sumner. The National Insurance Employers' increase will increase costs to this council by £2.5 million. The government has said that councils will be compensated, yet today it remains unknown how that will happen or if there are any caveats. And the council is currently recruiting 15 roles at taxpayer cost of £1.7 million per year, while being £8 million overspent, and apparently there's meant to be a recruitment freeze. It is only staff employed on the day of the budget. Don't know. So only those staff are covered. Is there a risk that it's actually staff only employed in April, at the start of the new financial year when the tax changes comes in? Are we covered by that? Or is it all future staff hires, so that if something is recruited in May or September, are we compensated for the increase in national insurance employees rate? We actually don't know. The policy was half-baked, and we are running risks when it comes to what we're approaching. Yet this is special treatment which no business is going to receive. At least they know what the impact is, and we are seeing that across the town and across the country. We have seen this government withdraw the winter fuel allowance and accept they didn't conduct an impact assessment. We now know that this courageous decision will drive 100,000 more pensioners into poverty. Labour councillors agreed with the government and refused to take any action to encourage those affected to be most helped, voting against positive local action. The government watchdog has said that the government's own impact assessments on the new employers bill is not fit for purpose or provide evidence of the problem being solved. The recent budget has hammered all businesses, small, medium and large, and its impact continues to unravel. All the points in the motion are factual. We even directly quote the Office of Budget Responsibility itself. If there are issues with the recommendations, then we can and should debate what those are. This is what happened when it was a Conservative council, where it was viewed as constructive, useful feedback for those in charge who needed to hear what was happening in Swindon. In contrast, it seems that Labour councillors won't ever challenge what the Labour government will do. It backs them to the hill and would prefer to attack the Tories than recognise and take note of what is going on for this council or for this town. We continue to see Labour councillors, even tonight, talk against councillors proposing motions. Asking cabinet member questions was a recent one. Yet not one Labour councillor really spoke to the motion and its impact on Swindon. Every Conservative councillor did. In fact, it sounds like they didn't ever want to debate the issues for Swindon residents and businesses if it is a Labour government putting it forward. Thank you.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There have obviously been a range of comments of varying political expediency and anger. I'm disappointed that we can't bring something to Swindon Borough Council that affects the residents of Swindon, it affects Swindon Borough Council, it affects businesses that exist within the Borough of Swindon, and simply ask for our council to express concern about this thing that's going to affect them. I'm really, really deeply disappointed. The fact is that there have been some passionate statements made by various members around this chamber, but this is asking for help for Swindon. This is asking for help for Swindon Borough Council and people that rely on employers in this area. I fully understand and anticipated that the Labour group would not be supporting this motion. I'm disappointed, but we will continue to stand up for the businesses and people of Swindon. Thank you.
Is Council content to agree the motion on tax on jobs? All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? I declare the vote lost. Moving on to agenda item 11, which are the minutes of Cabinet and decisions delegated to Cabinet members. Can I invite the leader to move the minutes of the Cabinet meetings held on 17th July and 11th September 2024 and the Cabinet members' delegated decisions as set out on pages 31 to 54 of the agenda papers pack?
Happy to move as tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Please indicate if you wish to ask a question or make a comment on the minutes of the Cabinet meetings held on 17 July and 11 September 2024 and Cabinet members' delegated decisions. If no one indicates, I will take them on block. Is Council content to note the minutes of the Cabinet held on 17th July and 11th September 2024 and the Cabinet members' delegated decision notices? All those in favour, please show. Against? I declare the vote carried. Moving on to agenda item 12, which are the minutes of the other council bodies. I would draw members' attention to the separate council minute book and note that all pages numbers refer to that. Minutes of meeting Tuesday, 17th September 2024 of Audit Committee, pages 5 to 8. Councillor Creeley, will you please present the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee as tabled?
As presented, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nadine Watts, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Standards Committee as tabled?
As tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Heenan, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee as tabled?
As tabled.
Councillor Chandler, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Children's and Adult Overview and Scrutiny Committee as tabled?
I move as tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Amin, will you please present the minutes of the meeting of the Policy Development and Scrutiny Committee, Build a Fairer Swindon as tabled?
As tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carol Shelley, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Planning Committee as tabled?
Move as tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Milner-Barry, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Education Transport Appeals Subcommittee as tabled? Councillor Dixon, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the School Forum as tabled? Councillor Amin, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Authority as tabled?
As tabled, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Amin, will you please present the minutes of the meetings of the Wiltshire Police and Crime Panel as tabled?
As tabled, thank you.
Moving on to the final agenda item, which is Councillor's question time. I will now invite the Chief Legal Officer to report on the Standing Orders 15 questions that have been received.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Standing Order 15 questions have been received from Councillors Daniel Adams, Gail Cook, Lawrence Elliott, Suresh Gatapur, Matthew Valinder, Kevin Parry and Councillor Dale Heenan.
The Standing Order 15 questions and the responses from the Cabinet members have been published in the additional papers pack on pages 5 to 22. Councillor Adams, do you have a supplementary question in respect of pitch and putt golf course at Courtwater? Councillor Cook, do you have a supplementary question in respect to unregistered foster care placements? Councillor Cook, do you have a supplementary question in respect of multi-agency flooding meetings?
Thank you for his scant and rather dismissive answers. Bearing in mind the meeting he talks about took place nearly 5 months ago, we have no information that anything has progressed. Wroughton residents have raised these issues with me, which is why I ask him these questions and will continue to do so until I get them the answers they deserve. To summarise, the meeting 5 months ago on is frankly insulting to me, who has been asking for months, and to my residents. I would like to know the following. Point 1, has this commenced? Point 2, has this now been completed and is now being monitored? Point 3, will he update the councillors of all parties on the outcome of his bid? Point 4, when he will result the investigations to be released? Point 5, has this now been completed? Point 6, has this been monitored? Point 7, is this summary now available for councillors to see? Point 8, what is the timeline for this? Point 9, what is the timeline for this? Point 10, when will this be circulated? Point 11, will these...
Your time's up, Councillor Cook.
You're just going to have to email the questions. I can't answer those now. There are many you've asked, so please email them through and I'll get answers to you. Can I just add as well that as far as communications with your residents and getting answers, we've had one communication to do with the petitions, and I've just had a meeting with residents from Rawton as well who've told me that these flooding issues have go back to 2019 and they've had no resolution. So I do feel sorry for the residents that they haven't been serviced at all, and these are long-standing issues. But with the changes that we're making to the lead local flood authority and working with the Environment Agency and working with Thames Water, we're looking to get those problems, which are long-standing, resolved as soon as possible. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Watt, for meeting my residents of Rawton tonight. Thank you very much.
Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of road sweeping?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his answer, but just one follow-up. I asked if the Cabinet member could confirm that the borough's road sweeping will continue. He's replied yes, and they have no intention of reducing the service further. My next question was, if yes, will the Cabinet member provide a route plan and schedule in order for ward members to alert their residents? You've replied, not applicable. Now, I've been trying to get answers on road sweeping, both through the members' case system and now through SO15 questions, and no one seems to have a route plan or a schedule. So is that because you don't know it, or there isn't one that exists?
Well, the situation is that I know that the resource that is available currently for road sweeping isn't enough, and that we do have to increase that, and it works on an ad hoc basis and on requests as well. So if I was to give you a list, then that list probably wouldn't stand up to the test of time as it was being reactive. When we can get that service back to a proactive service, then we can get a list. We can get that sort of those schedules put in place. Thank you.
Councillor Cook, do you have a supplementary question in respect of the Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal? Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of Swindon libraries?
Yes, I do. And I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his answer. We've seen the number of under-18s who say they enjoy reading for pleasure at its lowest level since the National Literacy Survey began in 2005. And 20.5% of the 76,000 respondents said they read daily in their free time, which is down from 28% in 2023. And that full enjoyment was much steeper in secondary school. Does the Cabinet member agree that cuts to library services risk jeopardising that even further?
Yes, I do agree, but as we haven't cut any of the library provision in this town, and we don't intend to cut any of the library provision in this town, there must be other ways of addressing that, and I've recently had a meeting with the National Literary Trust, and we're working together with them in order to address that problem. Happy to talk to Councillor Vallender about that and any ideas he might have on how we can address the lower literacy debate in Swindon.
Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of violation of tree preservation orders? Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of calls to customer service? Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of cost of Rodboncini by-elections? Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of Cat's Brain farm site? Councillor Vallender, do you have a supplementary question in respect of profit or loss from recycling waste? Councillor Kevin Perry, do you have a supplementary question in respect of Ninth Community Centre?
Yes, I do. Last I heard from Councillor Small, he's going to dip his toe in the swimming pool and get back to me, and he never did, so I was a bit concerned, but pleased that he did respond. As he's not here, obviously I'll put the question. with the fact of his reply, and there was no consultation acknowledged by cabinet decision acknowledged by the chief exec, does the cabinet member accept this was just a done deal?
Thank you for your question. I'll provide a written answer.
Councillor Adams, do you have a supplementary question in respect of Christmas waste collections? Councillor Valinder, do you have a supplementary question in respect of flooding in the South Marston area?
Yes, I do. And I would again like to thank the cabinet member for his response, but he hasn't actually answered a single one of the questions tabled. And I have been, again, trying with the LLFA officers, South Marsden Parish Council have been trying to get answers. We've hit the point where I'm now tabling SO15 to try and get answers to some of these on anything. We've seen residents' houses flood again this weekend from Storm Bert. Again, no progress on the Section 19 report, still not published. And it's incredibly frustrating that this has shown a complete disdain for this set of questions as we're trying to get answers, we're trying to see improvements. So will the cabinet member reflect and come back with a full answer on this?
Councillor Van, I'd like to thank you for the very comprehensive questions that you have put forward. I think probably the best thing to do, probably section standing order 15 questions isn't the best way of doing this. Can we arrange a meeting with the lead local flood authority officers, and we'll sit down and go through these in detail? I think that would be a better forum than doing it this way. And I'm sorry that you haven't got the answers back that you feel you should have previously. But no, I'm happy to sit down with you and your fellow ward members as well to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. I appreciate that. We've been trying for a year, so I'd greatly appreciate the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Heenan, do you have a supplementary question in respect of Officer vacancies?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the council being 8 million overspent, does the council need all 423 vacant roles to be recruited to meet its legal duties? If not, what is the number that needs to be recruited out of the 423 to meet its legal duties?
I'll have to get back to you with a written answer on that one.
Councillor Heenan, do you have a supplementary question in respect of employees' national insurance increase?
Yes, thank you. If a 1% increase in care costs is about £1 million and we're expecting costs to increase by 8% instead of 5%, with open book accounting being used, how much of this increase can be attributed to the increase in employer taxes announced in the recent budget?
I'm not sure that we can get an exact answer on that, but I will make sure that we get a written question that details it for you. And just to add that with the local government settlement information that came out today, it might further inform some of the questions that you already asked. So if there isn't more information in that, I will try and answer those questions as well.
Since this is our last meeting for this year, I would like to wish all Swindon residents a Merry Christmas and all our councillors a very happy Christmas and safe holidays. I declare the meeting closed and wish members and all other in attendance a safe journey home. Good night.